Topic, let me tell you, if you're religious and you're stuck on that, and you're not seeking to go deeper, to search out more, my suggestion is that you remove yourself from here. It's probably not a great place for you. If you make these kinds of comments that you're expecting to try and get me saved over here in YouTube, let me tell you, there is no doing that. And I have walked a journey that is the most intense journey of anything that you can ever imagine. Not only going through the physical death, leaving this existence, and seeing the source of all existence in the mirrored image, but I came back and went through it here as well. Traveled all over the place and into the depths of the wilderness, to in every corner and every center, I found that this was the truth. Philosophy backs it up. Science backs up what I speak of. Ancient text backs it up. Your own theology backs this up. And psychology backs this up. Mathematics backs this up. There is really not much more fundamental, foundational truth to show you if in every corner there's something that backs this up. So, today we're going to talk about the temple must fall. And there is a point on the path where truth stops being comfortable and starts becoming necessary. And when that happens, the entire way you see God, self, church, identity, and reality begins to shift. The way you even do life shifts. Because awakening is something that is not just about seeing something beautiful. It's about seeing what was built, distortion. It is about realizing that some of what we called faith was actually fear. Some of what we've called truth was actually tradition. And some of what we called God was actually nothing more than projection. You see, that is why this message matters so much. Because you see, Jesus was not simply offering another religion to join. No. Matter of fact, we did this. And anybody in a religious structure that says that man didn't create religion, well, they would be completely, utterly lying to you. Jesus was not here simply offering another religion for people to come join. And he was not building a system of control. He was not creating a structure that would keep people dependent and external authority forever, or even at all. He was revealing a way of seeing, a way of knowing, a way of becoming conscious, a way of gazing into the mirror, seeing the divine that you truly are. And that is why so much of his message was misunderstood. And religion went and packaged it up and constructed it and made it into careers, even forms of control. Because once truth is turned into institution, the living message becomes dead form. And it becomes a shell. A structure without a temple, without presence. And this is where his word about the temple becomes so important. He said not one stone would be left upon another. That is not just a prediction about architecture. You see, it's a warning. It is a revelation. It is a declaration that every false center must eventually collapse. Everything built on separation will eventually fall. Everything built on illusion cannot remain. Everything built on outward dependence, it must be dismantled so that what is real can emerge. And this is not only about religion. This is about the inner architecture of consciousness, the divine of which you truly are, original blueprint. The I amness, not I am not. You see, because of us has built, because each of us has built a temple inside of ourselves. We have a structure of belief, a structure of identity, even some of the inherited ones of fear, a structure of stories about who we are, what God is, even what life is, even what death is. And it's not the things we've been taught. It's not. It's just, and Jesus came to challenge these things, these structures. And yet here we went and built them. And act like it was his place. Not to flatter it, not to preserve it, not to challenge it. You see, that is why he kept directing people inward. And somehow we built all these external things and we've forgotten about the journey within. Not towards a distant holy place. Not towards an external savior. Not towards not towards a priesthood that would stand between you and the divine. The kingdom's within. Inward journey. Right into the center of your being. Because the place you have been searching for is not somewhere else. It's not in the sky. It's not in some building you attend on a Sunday or anywhere, some temple. It's not in some man on a stage or some person. It's within you. You see, and if that is true, then that changes everything, doesn't it? Because the moment we realize the kingdom is within, you also realize that the temple out there was never a final destination. It's a false illusion. It built an external kingdom that never existed. It was always pointing something deeper. A symbol, a map, a mirror. Now hear this carefully. There is nothing wrong with symbols. There's nothing wrong with rituals. There's nothing wrong with sacred places and spaces. But if we mistake the symbol for the reality, we become trapped. If we worship the form instead of the presence, we lose the point entirely. If we cling to the shell and ignore the living message, we become disciples of structure rather than truth. And this is why deconstruction is often necessary. Not because destruction is the goal, but because false construction must fall. You see, the old must be seen clearly before it can be released. And this process can feel painful. Oh man, it's a stripping. Because the human mind loves certainty. And the nervous system, well, it loves familiarity. And the ego, well, it loves external reference points. It wants a map it can control. It wants God. It wants a God it can manage. It wants truth that will not require too much change. But awakening does not work that way. Awakening is disruptive. It disrupts the false self. Is religion superstition behavior, but the supernatural is spiritual? Religion is something we created as a control to basically misdirect us from the inner journey. At the end of the day, inside. See, awakening, it's disruptive because it disrupts the false self. But it does is it unsettles the old identity. And it strips away the coverings we use to feel safe. And this is why so many people resist it, because the temple, falling feels like death. Because all of a sudden you went from having an external excuse, an external thing to blame, to realizing it's all right here, baby. Sometimes what feels like death is actually release, because sometimes what feels like loss is actually liberating. And sometimes what feels like collapse is simply the beginning of truth. Even Jesus spoke of fire for this reason. He said he came to bring fire upon the earth. Fire burns, fire reveals, fire transforms. Fire does not ask permission from what is false. It consumes what cannot remain. In nature, fire is not only destruction, it is also renewal. See, a forest fire, it clears dead growth so new life can emerge. Like a seed doesn't even erupt without 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it cracks open. It makes room. It opens space. It returns the land to movement. And the same is true inwardly. There are parts of us that must be burned away. If we're honest about our sexuality, doesn't that truth make us free? 100% be honest about what you are, where you're at. Like, there's no shame in being who you are. There are parts of us that must be burned away, not our essence. Not our being, not our divine nature, but the false layers, the inherited lies. And see, the fear-based construction, the identity is built to survive rather than to live. And when that fire comes, it can feel intense. Because the old self does not go quietly. The old self clings. It rationalizes, it resists. It tries to preserve the old temple. Because you cannot awaken while defending illusions. You cannot enter truth while protecting falsehood. That's something you have to ask yourself if you felt those experiences. You cannot live the kingdom within while remaining loyal to a kingdom of fear outside yourself. Now, this is where the words of Jesus about the temple becomes even more powerful. Not one stone left upon another. Why would he say that? Because the external forms were never meant to replace inward realizations. There is no external form. You are that external form. Because the sacred was never meant to be trapped in a stone. Because the presence of God was never confined to an architecture. Because the living temple of consciousness itself is you. You're it. And if the consciousness is asleep, no building can save it. But if the consciousness awakens, no building can contain it. This is why he said also things that divided people so deeply. Because truth divides before it unites. It separates the real from the unreal, the seen from the unseen, the conscious from the unconscious, and the genuine from the inherited. And this is why families are divided. This is why communities can be divided, and this is why institutions can be divided. Because when one person awakens, they no longer speak the same language as the system that kept them asleep. That is not because awakening is violent. It's because illusion is fragile. Illusion cannot survive clear sight for long. And this is why people often react strongly to truth. They are not just reacting to ideas. They are reacting to the collapse of their own inner architecture. And the inner architecture of the human being is often built around fear of death, fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, fear of being alone, fear of not knowing. But what if death itself has also been misunderstood? What if death that Yeshua spoke about was not the end of being, but the end of illusion? What if death is the collapse of the false self? What if resurrection is not a future event, but a present awakening? What if being born again meant the consciousness of Christ emerging within you now, seeing you yourself as I am that I am? That is not distant promise. That is a living reality. And that changes everything. Because then salvation is not about escaping earth. It's about seeing clearly while here. It is not about waiting to be made holy later. It is about remembering what has always been true now about you right now. You are not separate from Christ. You are not waiting for Christ to arrive from outside of you. The Christ consciousness is you. You are it. It was and always has been within you and you. That does not mean some human personality is identical to the fullness of a divine mystery. It means the light, the awareness, the presence, the truth that even Yeshua himself pointed towards is not foreign to you. You are it. It is native to your being. It is closer than your breath, closer than you thought, closer than your identity. It is a blueprint of your original design, and this is why so much of what he said was about seeing, hearing new with new ears, knowing from within, because the real work is not collecting more information, is becoming available for revelation, and the revelation requires surrender, and that is hard for the mind, because the mind wants control. It wants a definition. It wants some external image to go after. It wants proof. It wants certainty before transformation, but truth often comes before certainty. And sometimes truth feels like being lost before it feels like being found. That is why deconstruction matters so much, because the old temple must fall before the living presence can be recognized. And the old wineskin cannot hold the new wine. New consciousness cannot be forced into old forms. There are many dimensions. The many dimensions even within yourself. Old structures crack under new awareness. And that is not a failure. That is a sign of growth. That is what spiritual maturity looks like, is not clinging harder, not defending harder, not pretending the old form is enough, but allowing what is false to be exposed, allowing what is dead to die, allowing what is real to rise. And this process is not merely religious. It is, it is psychological. It is philosophical. It is neurological. It is embodied. The brain rewires through repetition. The nervous system changes through safety and exposure. The psyche reorganizes through integration. The soul, if we can use that word, evolves through surrender. And every level of your being must participate in awakening. You cannot think your way into Christ conscious alone. You cannot perform your way into it. You cannot inherit it from a preacher. You cannot outsource it to a church. It must realize it. You must embody it. You must become truthful enough to let the false temple fall. And now this does not mean rejection, everything external. It means understanding what is primary. The external can point. The external can remind. The external can support. But the external cannot replace the inner reality. If the inside is asleep, the outside will not save you. If the inside is awake, the outside becomes secondary. And this is why. Yeah, there are many dimensions. And this is why the most radical teachings of Jesus were never really about maintaining an outer system. They were about the kingdom revealing the inner kingdom. And an inner kingdom changes your relationship to everything. You see differently. You love differently. You grieve differently. You speak differently. You stop chasing appearances. You stop needing a middleman for every encounter with the sacred. You stop mistaking traditions for truth, and you stop defending what cannot live, and you begin to live from what cannot die. And that is the shift. That is the awakening. That is the kingdom within. But understand this too. Awakening is not always peaceful at first. It can feel like fire. It can feel like a sword. It can feel like separation. It can feel like being pulled apart from old identities, old communities, old ways of being. And that is Because the truth does not divide, not to destroy life, to clear it, to cleanse it, to cut away illusion, to make space for what is real. And this is why the ancient image of fire is so essential. Fire transforms gold. Fire purifies metal. Fire burns off dross. Fire reveals what remains when everything unnecessary is removed. And in the same way, awakening reveals what remains when all falsehood is burned away. What remains is not fear. What remains is not your performance. What remains is not your mask. What remains is not your story. What remains is presence, awareness, being Christ within. This is the place Jesus was pointing to all along, not some external being, not a place far away, not a future escape, not a separate heaven reserved for later, but the living reality of divine awareness awakening within now. That is why he said the kingdom of God is within you. That is why he warned people not to chase after appearance. That is why he spoke against empty religious display. That is why he disrupted systems that were built to mediate what was already present. He was not creating dependency. He was dissolving it. He was not strengthening illusion. He was exposing it. He was not leading people far away from the sacred. He was leading them into it, the divine within you. And that path is a path of the inner honesty, a path of deconstruction, a path of fire, a path of truth, a path of where the temple falls so the living presence can rise. So let the stone fall. Let the false structures collapse. Let the inherited fears be seen clearly. Let the outer forms return to their proper places as symbols, not subtle substitutes. But the kingdom be reorganized within. Let Yeshua be remembered within. Let truth burn away what is not true. And let remain be what was always there, not later, not elsewhere, not over there, here, now, within you. And that's the message. That is the fire. That is the temple is you. That is the awakening. You. Peace and love. See you guys tomorrow.